One exhibit at the National World War II Museum is all about the home front. It explains how the people who were home in America during the war, including kids, kept informed about the war and about how they could do things to help in the war effort. Museum volunteer Joyce Dunn was in elementary school when the war started. When the Japanese attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, America was suddenly at war. What do you remember about that day?
Oh, I remember it so much. My mother had the radio on, and I'll never forget that day when she looked and said, "We're at war, Pearl Harbor has been bombed." She told us that was part of America that was bombed.
During World War II, 42 million kids were on home front. What was it like for kids back then?
Well, one thing we did was we could write our relatives who were in the war. And I can remember vividly writing these V-mails to my uncle and also to my cousin. And that meant a lot to them that they would receive mail from us.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, I understand that everything changed. What type of things changed?
Quite a bit changed. First of all, the food we could eat, everything was rationed. My mother would have to go get a ration book, and that was the main concern about the food and the ration.
Everything changed, including pennies. As I see here, instead of copper pennies, back then you used steel pennies.
That's right, because copper was really needed, a commodity for the war, because it was used for wiring. It conducts electricity, and it was very important. So copper was no longer used in 1943. The government found a way to use steel pennies. You see right here, I have a steel penny, and if you notice, it's magnetic. And if we had a copper penny, I could show you that it wouldn't be magnetic. Oh, you have one in your pocket.
Penny right here.
Yes, you see? Okay, and then if you try and use it, it doesn't stick because it is not magnetic like the steel. Yes, and that is the reason why in 1943 the government changed to the steel penny in order to save the copper.
During World War II, I understand that there was no TV, no internet, no video games. So what did you use to get all your information?
Well, first of all, we used the newsreel at the movie theater, but also they had wall posters all around. They called them propaganda posters. And these posters were made to unite us. Because so much equipment had to be made, and so many men who worked in the factories were now fighting in the war, the government called on women to take their place. They were given a special nickname. What about the famous propaganda poster about Rosie the Riveter? Well, you see, during the war, the men went off, and so they needed someone to service and make the tanks and make everything. And so what happened, the women went to war at home. And it was known as Rosie the Riveter.
This little girl looks like she would be the same age as you during World War II, Miss Joyce. Why does she have a teapot, a bicycle tire, and shoes?
The reason why we were scrapping during the war. And you've noticed rubber from the shoes. And all these things were sent to help the war. There was also fat. When you fry bacon or other things, the fat would go in here. Your mom or your dad would take this to the butcher, and then they would send it to a certain place, and they would use it for glycerin or nitroglycerin later on. So this was very important, the fats during the war, because they were used very much for ammunition.
Bacon fat was used to make bombs?
Absolutely. Isn't that strange? But it was a very important part of the home front. These are the things we did to help the war.
Another way to help out was buying war stamps?
Oh yes, this was very important during the war.
How do these stamps work?
Well, Chris, this is how it did, and this is a war bond book. For 10 cents, you'd fill in every blank. And when the pages were filled, it was $18.70. And then you turn it in and you get a $25 war bond. The savings bond was so essential because just think of all the tanks, the airplanes, everything that was needed during the war. And so how did we get the money? War bonds. All the money that were collected from these bonds were used so that we could fight the war and win.
Thanks, Ms. Joyce. You've helped us all understand how even folks on the home front, including kids like me, helped win the war and how we were all in this together.
Well, Chris, it's been my pleasure, and I think it's very important that children of your age remember how it was
in those early days, because that was the war that really changed the 20th century. And here we are free. And a lot of men and women died for our freedom. So we should always remember that.